Good afternoon, Retrievers. I love this place. I love this place. Welcome to Homecoming at UMBC. We're actually very privileged to kind of kick off Homecoming for the weekend, for the week, and all that. My name is Carl Steiner. I serve as the Vice President for Research and Creative Achievement. I had to look up my own title here for a second at UMBC. And I want to give you just a 1 minute back on GridX. It actually was conceived for the 50th anniversary of UMBC. That was 8 years ago, when we realized we needed to have a way of highlighting the great work of our alumni, of our faculty members, and we came up with what some of you would think is like TEDx, but we don't do TEDx at UMBC, we do GridX, right? You saw that, Global Research, Innovation, Trends, and Excellence. And then I realized yesterday that it's almost time for us to go to the 60th anniversary, 2 more years, and this lovely campus turns 60. That's kind of amazing. So the goal, as I said, is to highlight some of the breadth of research and of creative activities across our campus. So you will take a journey with us, a journey around the world, and actually you will find out a journey out of this world as before we're done today. The next 2 hours will take you to a lot of fun places, and we want to make sure that you learn about impact lessons on how to prevent violence in Baltimore. We move from there to the spooky but very real world of quantum physics, and then we learn about the amazing world of fonts and typography. Only at UMBC do you get those 3 topics in one session. I just want to point that out. Then we will learn how the peacock got its tail, and I'm going to leave it at that because that's going to be really awesome. We learn about the Black freedom struggle back in the 1980s and some of the relevance to today. And we make a case for lifelong learning and education. And in our 3rd session, we will learn about why moms should lead computing education. We will learn how UMBC will join the next astronauts that go to the moon. Seriously, UMBC is going to the moon. And we'll demonstrate on this stage, and that's the one I'm really both nervous and excited about because we're going to try something very new this year, a real-life demonstration of how humans and robots can work together to help save lives. So 3 sessions, hopefully 30 minutes each, then we have 10 minutes in between for a little resetting of the stage. And we hope you stay for the entire 2-hour session. And afterwards, I invite all of you to go to the building next door because for the first time we have what we call a reception and a showcase. And the showcase are really faculty who have presented in earlier years. And since we don't repeat GridX, you get a one shot. We invited some of the colleagues from the last 6-7 years, and they have booths next door, and they highlight some of the work that they have built since they were on the stage before. So with all that, I know you will enjoy the presentations, and I know that you will learn something today. So on that note, it is my honor to introduce our first moderator. That is Dr. Kimberly Moffitt, who is the Dean of our College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Dean Moffitt.
Good afternoon, and welcome to colleagues, faculty, family, friends, and alumni for joining us today. I have the honor of introducing our first speaker, who is Stephanie Mavronis. She is a 2012 graduate of UMBC in Media and Communication Studies, as well as Political Science. Stephanie is a public servant, first-generation college student, and lifelong Baltimorean. In fact, born and raised in Dundalk. She currently serves as the director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, also known as MONSE, which is a city agency tasked with implementation of Baltimore's first comprehensive violence prevention program. She previously served as director of communication for Mayor Brandon Scott, and using her education in politics, public policy, and media, Stephanie has built a career supporting social justice issues and progressive campaigns for change. After UMBC, Stephanie earned her master's in public affairs with a certification in urban policy and planning from Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs. We look forward to hearing from her. May I please welcome Stephanie Mavronis to the stage.
afternoon, UMBC. It is great to be here with you, making the impossible real. The impossible that I'm talking about is the notion that violence in the city of Baltimore could ever change. And homegrown leaders are essential to the progress that we've been seeing. We're currently experiencing historic declines in violence that we've seen continue from 2023 to 2024. And homegrown leaders from our grassroots to our mayor are essential to the progress. So this is a picture of me when I was a student here at UMBC. If you had told me then that I would be doing this, much less leading this work now, I would not have believed you. But UMBC is really the institution that cemented my love for public service and also my commitment to Baltimore. And so I think my curiosity, my stubbornness, probably my city, my mayor had other plans for me, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So this slide shows Baltimore City homicides by year, from 2012, the year that I graduated, through where we are year to date in 2024. So you'll see in 2015, there was a large spike in homicides, and our homicide rate stayed pretty constant at above 300 homicides every single year for the next 7 years. Then if you look all the way to the right of this image, you'll see where we are today. Year to date, as of this morning, we've recorded 162 homicides with a little more than 2 months to go until the end of the year. And so making some important progress and progress that we're working really diligently to sustain. Our approach that we've been taking since Mayor Scott assumed office the end of 2020 has been really focused on expanding what we think of when we talk about public safety, recognizing that we have to invest in prevention, in intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry, in addition to traditional approaches that focus on accountability and enforcement. And just to give some context for where we were as a city, how we were approaching this problem up until this administration, we understood public safety as something that police, prisons, and prosecution was really the totality of. We took many zero tolerance policies, taking a broad brush, not targeting our approaches. And we were looking at public safety through a very narrow lens without seeing benefits to our public safety outcomes. And so it was clear that we had an opportunity to really change the notion and get ahead of violence so that we could stop it. So fast forward to 2017, I was in grad school. There's me in the middle with some of my classmates, and then Councilman Scott, who was the chair of the City Council Public Safety Committee. He was a big advocate, as he still is, for treating violence as a disease and using public health strategies to attack it. And so we worked together to develop and look at research about what other cities were doing, what other initiatives and strategies that were rooted in the evidence were out there that Baltimore could learn from and really take to put and make a part of a new public safety approach. And the reason why that comprehensive approach is so important is in part what you can see in this image here. We see the homicide rate, we see that raw number, but every single instance of violence, every single shooting and homicide has a cascading effect. It impacts the children, the bystanders, the family, the loved ones, the community of that one person. And so that's not something that's captured in that homicide total, but really it shows why it is so imperative that we get ahead of the problem. And this was really the crux of our hypothesis when we were working on that research with then Councilman Scott. If we invest in prevention, if we invest in intervention, we believe that we'll start to see sustainable reductions in violence in Baltimore City. And now, 3 years and some change into implementing our strategies, that's exactly what we're doing, and the nation is taking note. In 2023, we ended the year with 262 homicides, which was a 20% decrease from the year prior, and was also the largest single year decrease we saw since 1970 when this data was first recorded. And so really important progress. I do want to say before I move further here something really important, which is that one life lost to violence is one too many. This is not a celebratory talk. It's important that we take stock of the progress that we're making, but also recognize we have to double down on our commitments, and in many ways, the hard work is just beginning. We need to now sustain our progress. We need to show that we can institutionalize our initiatives so that we're able to continue to show these results, reduce trauma, reduce violence for the long haul. And so in December 2020, when Mayor Scott won his election as the youngest mayor in Baltimore in a century, running on a platform of treating violence as a public health crisis, one of the first things he did as mayor was establish the agency that I now lead, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And with that, invested $50 million into prevention and intervention strategies. And so we also released the city's first ever comprehensive public safety plan that went beyond the role of policing. That plan is one that came out in July 2021, and like I said, we're a little more than 3 years now into that implementation. And so where we started as an administration, you can see here on the slide, we had a few initiatives, a few programs in this realm. To date, we have significantly grown this landscape to really span the whole host of prevention, intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry, and we're still working to grow that today. And so a lot of the work that we're doing, be it neighborhood stabilization work, flooding neighborhoods with resources and supports in the immediate aftermath of mass shootings or other traumatic events, providing secondary victims of crime services where they weren't able to get them before, working with people who are returning home to Baltimore City after serving their time in prison to do safe return planning and make sure they're ready to come home. All of these things have a role in public safety, and we know that these strategies collectively and the many grassroots organizations doing the work, we could not do it without. We're a city agency. We need that partnership at that level, but we're a key convener, and we know collectively the totality of these strategies and trying a multitude of strategies, something that Baltimore City has not tried before, is what we believe is really working today. So like I said, we know this is working. The group violence reduction strategy in 2024 was evaluated, and we saw that it was associated with 60 fewer shootings and homicides over an 18-month period. Without an increase in arrest, we saw a quarter of the violence decline in the Western District, our city's most violent district. And that's just one of our strategies. So layering on top of that, another initiative in our community violence intervention ecosystem, Safe Streets, our credible messengers who are engaging in community outreach, engaging in mediation of violent incidents. Year to date, they have already mediated more than 1,000 incidents that could have resulted in violence. I want to give an example of one of those mediations just to showcase the power of this relational work. Our Safe Streets staff received a call from a resident who said that their cousin had something stolen from them, and the cousin was planning to retaliate against the person who stole from them. So they called Safe Streets and asked for assistance. Armed with nothing more than their community credibility and maybe an orange shirt, our Safe Streets workers immediately intervened in that situation, figuring out how to negotiate and determine a solution that was agreeable to both sides. And so in this case, our Safe Streets workers were able to broker an agreement where the items that were stolen were given back to that individual in exchange for them not agreeing to not carry out their plans to retaliate. And so in that instance, I think it's really important. It may sound like a mundane issue, but we know far too many people in Baltimore and other cities are losing their lives to conflicts that are otherwise small and petty. And it's important that we have individuals who can send that message and show that there is another way for the young people in that community, for the community as a whole to grow from. And the research also bears out that Safe Streets has been associated with significant decreases in homicides and non-fatal shootings where they operate. Just a month ago, I was standing with a few of our Safe Streets sites. We had 3 sites that went more than a year without any homicides in their zones. Since we took this picture, we've had 2 more sites achieve that same accomplishment. I think the secret sauce in our strategies is this homegrown leadership. We have individuals who are of and from the communities that they're now serving. They may have in the past contributed to the problem. They may have served time themselves, but now are on the front lines really brokering and leading for peace and violence reduction. I also want to lift up another homegrown leader who, without this work, would not be possible. Mayor Brandon Scott, his vision, his openness, his belief in this work. As the mayor, he sets the agenda. He is the one that controls what we're able to invest in and what we're able to try. And it's through his leadership and vision that we're able to truly do the work that we're doing, which is changing the culture of public safety. Just one word in conclusion, as we think about homegrown leadership and some of the reflections I had as I was putting together this talk. It's important that we lift up local solutions to local problems. And it's important that we get inspiration from outside and elsewhere. And at the same time, we should be cognizant of how we adapt to the context that we're in, the city that we're in. I think for us, homegrown leaders are the ones who are oriented to the problem. They're the ones who are going to be there to carry out the work for the long haul. And for that, it's why it's so important that we invest and lift up that work. And so with that, I just want to say it's been the honor of my lifetime to contribute in a small way to this mission. And just want to thank you all so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we will have Dr. Todd Pittman, who is Professor of Physics and Director of UMBC's new Quantum Science Institute, also known as QSI. He conducts experimental research on quantum entanglement, quantum information processing, and laser physics. Dr. Pittman holds 6 patents and is the author or co-author of 55 published scientific articles that have been cumulatively cited over 8,000 times. He is a fellow of Optica, as well as the 2016 winner of the CNMS Carl S. Weber Excellence in Teaching Award. Let us please welcome Dr. Pittman.
Okay. So thanks, Dean Moffett, for the nice introduction, and hello, fellow retrievers. Okay, so when we move away from our world of everyday human experiences, things like tables and chairs or apples falling from trees, and we go down to the scale of some of the smallest building blocks in the universe, things like atoms, or even smaller particles like photons and electrons, what we find is that the laws of classical physics, that is kind of regular physics, like many of you learned in Physics 101 right here on campus, those classical laws start to break down and the laws of quantum physics kick in. Now, the laws of quantum physics are wonderful. They always get the right answer. We've tested them thousands of times in thousands of different ways, and we know they're correct. The tricky thing is, the foundations that these quantum physics laws are built upon are very counterintuitive. They're unlike anything we see in our everyday human experience, and quite frankly, they're kind of strange. And so I think this sentiment is summed up very nicely in a series of quotes, my favorite being the one by Niels Bohr, where he says, if quantum physics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. For what we see in quantum physics is behavior like inherent randomness in the universe. We see particles being in 2 places at one time, and even quantum entanglement, or connections between distant particles that Albert Einstein once described as spooky action at a distance. So, whoa. When we think about these things, the kinds of questions we're going to be asking are along the lines of, does the moon only exist when I look at it? Now, obviously, at this large human size scale type of system, the answer is yes. But when we get down to the quantum realm, we have to take very seriously the analogous question of, do the properties of a quantum system exist only when I measure them? And so here we're talking about things like the spin of an electron, the energy of an atom, the color of a photon, or even something as simple as the position of a tiny little particle. And so to unpack this a little bit more, let's look at that last example, the position of a particle. And what we find is, in classical physics, the position of a particle is completely well defined. If I put my particle over here, my particle is at that location. In contrast, in quantum physics, our particles are described by wave functions, these wiggly, wild things that kind of spread out in all space in such a way that the position of the particle isn't really defined. In fact, it's as if the particle is at all locations at the same time. Now, when I go to measure the particle, if I reach my hand in and try and find where it is, I make a measurement, something very interesting happens. This wave function kind of collapses down to a very well-defined but randomly located point. And so now the position exists. Okay. These two red items here are very serious when we think about science. On the first point, random outcomes, Albert Einstein gives us his famous quote of "God does not play dice with the universe." But even more seriously is the other issue. For Einstein and many others like him at the time of the development of quantum mechanics, the idea was that there had to be an objective reality out there independent of the observer. The position had to exist whether I measured it or not. And so to poke at this a little further, Einstein and some of his colleagues said, hey, let's look at not just one particle, but let's extend up to two particles. Okay, and if this quantum mechanics stuff is all right, then it allows these particles to be entangled in such a way that they share a joint wave function that looks like the video going on in the background. And what quantum physics would predict in this scenario is if I make a measurement on this particle over here, its wave function collapses and I find the particle at a random location. It's very strange, but we've seen it before. Remarkably, at the same time, the wave function of the particle over here also collapses to a random location. Now, the correlations between these random locations are quite interesting, and in fact, they're necessary to understand all the subtleties of what's going on here. But the key message here is that a measurement I performed over here causes something to happen over there. And in the summary of Einstein's paper, he says, no reasonable definition of reality could be expected to permit this. Something probably many of you are thinking right now. The situation gets even stranger when we consider that quantum mechanics doesn't care about the distance between the particles, and so this can happen over very large size scales. Okay, so Einstein and his colleagues bring up this issue of quantum entanglement in 1935, and it took roughly 40 years of scientific advances and developments before entanglement was experimentally verified in the laboratory. It took another 40 years until I think this idea was widely accepted by the scientific community, in fact, and recognized by a Nobel Prize just 2 years ago in 2022. Now, in the meantime, there was something very exciting going on behind the scenes in the 1980s and 1990s. People were moving on from the ideas of just studying entanglement or seeing if it exists to asking, can we actually use quantum entanglement and these quantum effects, kind of bring them up to a human scale level and do something useful with them? And the answer was a resounding yes. It turns out we can process information using quantum effects in very new and powerful ways. And so that brings us to where we are now, which can only be described as a quantum information processing revolution. We've seen tremendous growth in the ideas and developments behind building things like quantum computers, quantum communication systems, quantum sensing devices, and a whole host of other quantum technologies. And this field's exploding in crazy ways by any metric you can think of. We see this in the number of patents, which has just skyrocketed in the last 10 years in the field of quantum information. We see this in tens of billions of dollars being invested by governments around the world for quantum information research. We see incredible hype like Time Magazine, my talk right here, and other things. But importantly, what we're seeing is renewed interest in science by young people. It's also led to the development of a very large number of companies investing in quantum computing. Not only some of the heavy hitters that you see there, but also something on the order of 300 small startup quantum information companies around the world as we speak. Okay, so I want to wrap up here by saying that and emphasizing that a lot of pioneering research in quantum information has been done and is being done right here at UMBC. In fact, we're in the process of setting up a brand new Quantum Science Institute, which is going to bring together faculty and students from several different departments across campus. And it's not only going to enable us to collaborate and accelerate our research and make more breakthroughs, but it's going to enable us to offer cross-disciplinary quantum science courses and academic tracks that are going to help to prepare, to train and educate our students to become the next generation of a quantum-ready workforce. So with that all close, it's an exciting time for quantum physics, and it's an exciting time right here at UMBC. Thanks for your attention.
Next, we will hear from Professor Gannett Abraham. She began her career as a book designer at Pantheon Books, Random House, and W.W. Norton in New York City, before she went on to earn an MFA in graphic design from the Yale School of Art. She currently serves as a professor in visual arts here at the university, specializing in typography, graphic design, and visual communication. Professor Abraham's work has earned recognition from organizations such as AIGA, AAM, UCDA, and Paris Photo Aperture Foundation Photo Book Awards. Alongside her teaching, Professor Abraham maintains an active design practice as the designer for St. Lucie Books. She has received 2 consecutive Fulbright Core Fellowships for teaching and research in Ethiopia. She is an affiliate professor at the Ale School of Fine Arts and Design, Addis Ababa University, which served as her host institution. She maintains a commitment to her host institution, frequently returning for teaching and collaborative endeavors with her colleagues. Let us please welcome Professor Abraham.
About typography. I want to convince you to care about typography, and I will demonstrate how designers use it to transform blank canvases to, to grab your attention, push you to action, or spark conversation. Typography, more than communication, evokes emotion, turning text into a visual journey that conveys meaning and mood. So you may not realize it, but your everyday choices, your actions from morning to evening, from your choice of toothpaste to how you engage with the world around you is actually guided by typography. So, like most everyday things, think about potato peelers or to-go cups. Typography is often misunderstood and taken for granted until it fails. So which of these 2 do you think communicates clearly? The answer is obvious. I'm not sure if we're supposed to read, "Am I okay?" or "I'm eok." On the other side, with economy of elements, it clearly tells a story. We clearly read the eye, even though knife, even though there's no eye. And I'm proud to share that incredible cover was designed by one of our own UMBC Visual Arts graduate and a former student. So on this Baltimore street corner, 6 businesses are vying for attention. The viewers, without processing or dissecting the choices that went behind the design, process the information. Friendly, neighborly, intimate, hip bookstore, classic yet modern Italian pastry with a little bit of the old world romance with that typography. So much like fashion and architecture, logotypes tell us who they are and whom they serve. It's not by accident that Dior will never be caught using the same generic, no frills, accessible Costco font. Typography can entertain, conjure a 3-dimensional presence, or playfully challenge the viewer, creating while at the same time telling a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. These typographic figures, both of them in their own way, are making references to the topics that they represent. One tells us about the Mario Bota's modernist architecture, as you see with the picture on the left. And you descend down into the engineering world of canals, tunnels, and subways. One captures beautifully the whimsical style, painting style of Redon on the left side, and on the right side, the red, bold sans serif, slab serif. And as I explained to my husband, those bars at the bottom and the crown at the top, those are the serifs. And the interplay, the figure ground between the red and the white clearly captures Bally Shoe's reputation. Swiss, dependable, well engineered. So you can soar up into the air with the dancers or experience a vibrant energy. And by the way, the poster on the right also tells us exactly what was the cultural trend at the time it was created. Typography has always marched alongside cultural, economic, political, and social shifts, evolving along the way to write its history. I want to share a couple examples of my students' work right here at UMBC in typographic exploration. Students create 12-page calendars, purely all in black and white, no images, and they choose their own topics. So these are two examples. So my own studio work is focused on book design primarily. Since I was a child, books have always fascinated me, their physicality and the world they open. Books, as vessels of human history, take the viewer on a longer journey than logos or posters. So designers are very aware of that and take that into consideration in their production. So letters and punctuations have a functional role. However, it is the space in between the contrast between the text and the negative space, the space between each letters, each character, each word, each line, every paragraph, and all the different layers of information. No information is small in a book, including a page number. The proportions, all of those decisions is what creates the flow of the information and guides the reader's experience. I collaborate here with CADVC to design some of the books, and St. Lucie Books that was founded by one of my UMBC colleagues right here in Baltimore. So it's always an interplay between negative and positive. I want to conclude with by sharing a project I did during my Fulbright years in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. I collaborated with my students to take 3 floors of bare walls and transforming them into typographic sort of celebration. My inspiration came from Ethiopia's rich writing history. I combined the Sabaean script, as you see on the left, a dead language, and a precursor to the current Ethiopian alphabet, which you see in the middle, and that's Ge'ez. And I also combined the Arabic letters, which is part of the Ethiopian cultural fabric. The integrity of the characters were actually not changed, but what I did is use the aesthetics and the proportions of the Sabaean characters to combine the Ge'ez, Arabic, and I also added a few Roman characters because that's considered as the international language in Ethiopia, and created as if it's one font, one series, unified and with their proportion and as if it's from one language. So here are some examples of, you could see the before and after. And we also use these typographic characters to actually create abstract imagery to say what that space is. It's a library, it's a learning place. It's also a place where people interacted with books and each other. So the digital age has democratized typography, giving it broad access, resurrecting dead scripts, which is essential for cultural diversity and indigenous script. Beyond aesthetics, typography also shapes culture by reflecting our values, molding our perceptions, and influencing how we connect with our interconnected worlds. So I hope I convince you that typography rules. Thank you.
If we can take the time to acknowledge our first three speakers, please. We have about a 5-minute break between as we welcome our next three speakers, so we will be right back.
I get to come out again. If you can all take your seats again, because it's almost 4:45, so the second session will start shortly. And can I just say, only at UMBC do you get a trip to the universe like the way we just showed you here. And we have only started, so there's more to come. My job now is to introduce our second moderator for the GridX session. That's Professor Anupam Joshi, the acting dean of our College of Engineering and Information Technology. Anupam.
Thank you, Carl. Ever in the best GridX ever. Actually, it's the session of the 3 Ps: peacocks, Protestant politics, and perspectives on life and aging. So our first speaker will talk about the biology of beauty, how the peacock got its tail. I'm particularly interested. Peacock happens to be the national bird of India. Dr. Tamara Mendelsohn is a professor in biological sciences. She grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and received her bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology and environmental studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She spent a couple of years working for the National Park Service in the Virgin Islands and then began her doctoral work at Duke. That makes it special, doesn't it, Madam President? She earned her PhD from Duke in 2001, did postdoctoral research at University of Maryland, College Park, and her first faculty position was at Lehigh before she joined the faculty here at UMBC in biological sciences in 2006. So without further ado, Professor Mendelsohn.
Well, thank you for coming. This is going to be interactive, so if I could ask you please to take out a smartphone if you have one and have it at the ready. We're going to use it later. Thank you. But for now, can anyone tell me what that is? Close. They are feathers. That's close enough for me. It's the feathers of an Argus pheasant. Aren't they beautiful? Darwin thought so. He mentions the Argus pheasant a lot in his second most famous book, The Descent of Man. He also mentions the word beauty or beautiful over 300 times in that book. It's really the central question of the book. Why is there beauty in nature? And he doesn't know. Why this should be so, we know not. And if we were to update the writing a little bit to bring us to this century, still the question is wide open. Why is there beauty in nature, and what even is it? So this is something I've been working on with my collaborators, and we've been applying concepts of beauty in philosophy to research on beauty in neuroscience and psychology to come up at least first with a definition. which is that beauty is the pleasure of fluent information processing independent of the function or consummatory reward provided by the stimulus. And to be clear, what we're trying to do here is come up with and develop a testable hypothesis for the evolution of sexual ornaments. So sexual ornaments are those traits that animals use to attract a mate, like the fabulous feathers of birds or the sweet sounds of crickets at night. More simply, what we're asking is, are sexual ornaments beautiful to their intended receiver? And if so, how does that beauty affect their mate choice? So I'm going to unpack this with three different attributes of beauty from philosophy, talk about how those coincide with concepts of beauty in neuroscience and psychology, and along the way we'll talk about how we can apply those to animals and their ornaments. So we'll start with the first attribute, and that is pleasure. Beauty is pleasure. Beauty as pleasure has been with us since really the dawn of Western thought, from Hume to Darwin and to modern empiricists like Breelman and Pelley, for example, who show that the valence of images like these, that is how they make us feel, good or bad, correlates significantly with their perceived beauty. So beauty is pleasure. So then if animals experience beauty, they must be able to experience pleasure. And we think that they do in areas of the brain called hedonic hotspots. So these areas, like the nucleus accumbens, the ventral pallidum, are active when animals experience a food or sex reward. And in humans, these areas are active also when listening to beautiful music or looking at beautiful art. And so these hedonic hotspots are actually also all the way through vertebrates. So these are brain slices of a mammal here. In blue are where the hedonic hotspots would be located. They're located in mammals and all throughout vertebrates, from mammals to fish. So if we wanted to test whether a sexual ornament was beautiful, we could test whether it activates these hedonic hotspots. And that has been shown, at least in white-throated sparrows. These hedonic hotspots, the nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area, are active in females when they're listening to a male song, especially if they're jacked up on estradiol, which makes them eager to breed. But notice that does not occur in males who are treated with testosterone. So beauty is pleasure, and we can test that. Next, beauty is an interaction. Oops. Yes, good. It's an interaction between the stimulus and the receiver. So we're going to play a game. So our friend Matt here is going to lead us from there. He's going to press on that. Easiest to join with the QR code. That goes faster, so you can press start. There will be a QR code coming up, or you can type kahoot.it into your browser and then enter that code. Don't spend too much time thinking about, a great name for yourself. Just type in some initials. We'll wait till we get a few players. What you're going to see when we start is, first I'm going to show you two blobs, two grayscale circle blobs, and I'm going to ask you which one you like better, the left or the right. All right, are you ready? All right, Matt, let's start. So question number 1, what do you like better, the left or the right? And act fast. You get 10 seconds. Go with your gut. Don't think about it. Correct. Very good job. Good job. Excellent. All right, next. Now next I'm going to make it a little, and next again. I'm going to make this a little harder. You're going to see 4 circles now, and I want you to tell me which one you like best. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Again, don't take too much time. Don't think about it. Gut. Interesting. That is a very interesting distribution. Perhaps not what I expected. Many of you are actually wrong, but that's all right. No, that's fine. It's totally fine. All right, so can we go back to our show, Matt? Thank you very much. Appreciate that, but remember this. All right, so the explanation for our preferences is the efficient coding hypothesis, thanks to Horace Barlow, which is that stimuli that correspond to the statistical features of natural scenes are the easiest to encode. So the environments that we live in have very predictable statistical patterns and features, And brains that evolve there have evolved to decode them efficiently. And they do that by using few specialized neurons that are tuned to the particular patterns of that environment. And they do that over evolutionary time. This is something we know from cognitive neuroscience. What we also know from psychology is that when information is easy to process, it generates a reward or pleasure. Psychologists call this fluency, and fluency is the most widely accepted model of beauty in psychology. And stimuli can be fluent for many reasons. Symmetry, high figure ground contrast, repeated elements can all cause fluency. But it's this effect of natural scene statistics and natural patterns that underlies the field of human empirical aesthetics. So this field hypothesizes that stimuli that correspond to the statistical features of natural scenes are the easiest to encode and therefore the most attractive. So this field focuses mostly on human appreciation of art, and their empirical analyses mostly use fractal statistics or fractal dimensions, of which there are many. And what they've shown is that natural terrestrial scenes have an average characteristic value of these fractal dimensions, and that people are attracted to, they like artwork that matches the fractal statistic of natural scenes. So a famous example is Jackson Pollock's work, which over the course of his career got closer and closer to the fractal statistic of natural scenes. You yourself showed a preference for natural scene statistics. It wasn't as good as I expected, but it was still there. But mostly what you showed was a preference for a Fourier slope, which is a fractal statistic, of minus 2.5. When we showed these blobs to about 2,000 participants online, they showed a peak preference for the Fourier slope at minus 2.39. The Fourier slope of natural scenes is minus 2.4. And it turns out that spiders might also have this preference. So when these were exactly. So when these blogs were shown to spiders, they too had a preference for the Fourier slope of natural scenes over that of another. So that means that the patterns that we like are because they're tuned to our brains. And finally, beauty is disinterested. What does that mean? Umberto Eco said, "We talk of beauty when we enjoy something for what it is, immaterial of whether we possess it or not. The sense of beauty differs from desire." And that aligns very well with our understanding of the reward system, which distinguishes liking from wanting. So wanting is activated mostly by dopamine in many different brain nuclei. Liking is limited to these hedonic hotspots. So that has led many to propose that beauty is liking, but not wanting. So then you might ask, well, how is that supposed to work with a sexual ornament if it's not eliciting wanting, like wanting to mate? Well, we think it works like this. Here's a lizard, female over on the left, that's her brain in the middle, and then there's a potential mate over on the right. She's in breeding condition, so she wants to mate. She sees the ornament, which she likes, and she wants to keep continuing processing it. If she's a social species, she wants to socially bond, and if that male has anything else to offer, she might want that also, like food or shelter. So she approaches. She still wants to mate, she still likes the ornament, she wants to continue processing it. Now she likes the social bond, she might like other things about that male, and all that liking can actually increase the motivation to mate. So it's been shown in rats and humans that endocannabinoids, which are one of the more common pleasure transmitters, actually increase motivation to mate. So she mates. So then just to summarize then, we think that beauty causes liking, which then increases the probability of approach. So to summarize then, beauty is pleasure. It is an interaction, it is disinterested, and now we have a testable hypothesis where we can ask, does the brain act as an agent of selection, shaping the diversity of life that we see? So do other animals have a sense of the beautiful like we do? Is that how the peacock got its tail? I don't know. Some people think that only humans can experience beauty, but I don't think we can accept that without testing it. So thank you very much.
Wasn't that cool? I particularly liked it. Any computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering, or math majors here? You are now all experts in beauty because you did a course in efficient coding in coding theory, and so you are now all good with aesthetics. I really love that part of the talk. We're going to move to the next P now, actually a pair of Ps. From protest to politics to protest and politics, the Black freedom struggle in the 1980s. Our speaker is Dr. George Musgrove, who's an associate professor of history and Africana studies. He's the author of 2 books, the most recent being Chocolate City, A History of Race and Democracy in the Nation's Capital, which was co-authored with Chris Ash. His work has appeared in all the great places, The Post, NPR, New York Times, Root. And he's currently working on another book project, tentatively titled We Must Take to the Streets Again, The Movement Resurgence in Conservative America, which explores the burst of black activism that rose in opposition to the urban crisis and conservative retrenchment in the 80s and the 90s. Dr. Musgrove earned his PhD from NYU in 2005 and lives in DC with his wife and 2 sons. Without further ado, Dr. Musgrove.
Good evening. So I'm just going to tell you all the story. This is the longest civil rights march in American history. For 2 months, a group of 60 trekked well over 2,700 miles from Tuskegee, Alabama to Washington, D.C. They stopped in about 70 places along the route, towns that were selected specifically for their large black populations that were in congressional districts that would affect the upcoming midterm elections. In every town they got to, they staged a march where people like Walter Fauntroy or Coretta Scott King or Dorothy Height would not only lead the march, but then take folks to a mass meeting that evening where they would fire up the crowds, get them ready for the next day. What happened the next day was that the marchers would go door to door, registering people to vote and asking them for their signatures on a petition to ask Congress to pass a Strengthened Voting Rights Act. Now, African Americans in these communities eagerly joined in with the marchers. By the time they got to Athens, Georgia, which was only 200 miles, into their journey, they had already signed up 3,000 people who had registered to vote and obtained 6,000 signatures on their petition. In the state of South Carolina, they were able to get about 8,200 people to vote in the target communities in that state. Now, for people who are familiar with narratives of the civil rights movement, this is going to sound really familiar. African Americans marching across the Southland, demanding that Congress pass voting rights protections, crusading preachers going door to door, demanding that African Americans register and head out to vote in the next election. But the pilgrimage happened in 1982, not 1962. I don't know if you all caught that in the hairstyles and the fashion. And the pilgrimage, if we think about it happening in 82, it really challenges our understanding of African American politics in the post-civil rights period. Now, that story about African American politics in the post-civil rights period goes something like this. After a season of difficult, even bloody protest, African Americans are able to secure really important civil rights and voting rights reform. That's, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And these laws ended Jim Crow segregation across the South and opened the political process to African Americans. Now, their way now unimpeded, African Americans lifted hundreds of their number into elected office. And this brings sort of a new transformation that Bayard Rustin, the organizer of the March on Washington in 1963, called the transition from protest to politics. Don't get me wrong, the struggle for equality is by no means over. There are all of these racial disparities that still exist, but African Americans now have the tools to address those disparities through the electoral process. They can actually send people to Washington or to their local city council to address these disparities there. Now, Andrew Young, the first African American elected to Congress from the South since Reconstruction, and of course we all know him as one of the lieutenants to Martin Luther King, had a wonderful phrase for this process. He said, you don't need to march on the sheriff when you can just pick up the phone and call someone. And in 1976, Andrew Young could actually call the most important sheriff of them all. In that year's presidential election, he was instrumental, quite literally the most important person in gaining well over 90% African American support for former Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter. And in that election, African Americans were Carter's margin of victory in over half a dozen states. And so as you can see from this editorial in Ebony magazine, African Americans expected Carter to pay them back through policy and appointments. Now, at this moment, we typically turn away from the story about post-civil rights politics, assuming that the progress of the 1970s will continue into the 1980s and beyond. Yet history seldom unfolds in such a neat and tidy manner. At the very moment that African Americans were lifting Carter into office, the bottom fell out of the U.S. industrial economy. Years of industrial decline, inflation, and a series of economic and energy shocks in the 1970s created what many commentators were calling an urban crisis in many of America's cities. In 1982, black unemployment jumped to over 20%. That was well over twice white unemployment. And in some major American cities, black youth unemployment was over 50%. Black leaders initially believed that they could turn to their friends in the Democratic Party to address their suffering. And so they called on President Carter, they called on Democrats who controlled the Congress to pass full employment legislation, to increase welfare benefits, to increase jobs programs, and of course, to enforce anti-discrimination law. But Carter honestly believed that the best way to get rid of the stagflation that had crippled the American economy was to cut the social services budget and to increase interest rates. That was guaranteed to create a recession, and it was guaranteed to increase the suffering in African American communities around the country. Now, Carter's reasoning was not just economic, it was also political. As the economy worsened, large numbers of white Americans turned on their black fellow citizens. They began backing and electing conservatives who not only wanted to get rid of anti-discrimination law, but in fact wanted to gut the social services budget. This at a moment where black unemployment is well into the high teens, into the early 20s percentages. In 1980, these voters, who are Democrats and Republicans who were moving in a conservative direction, elected Ronald Reagan to the White House. This conservative turn in US politics created a crisis of leverage for African Americans. One party is building a majority coalition against them, and the other party that they're a part of is taking them for granted. They had no clear path for actually gaining some relief from the urban crisis within the mainstream electoral process. So determined to break the impasse, many African American leaders decided to return to the protest politics of an earlier era. Yet rather than abandon politics for protest, they created a rich fusion that would come to define black politics for most of the 1980s, protest and politics. The activists at the fore of this effort were veterans of the civil rights and the Black Power movement, and so they brought the ideas and the strategies of those two movements to their contemporary endeavors. For this reason, I call what they did in the 1980s a movement resurgence. This turn back towards protest actually begins at the grassroots. Desperate to address the crisis facing their communities, African Americans began heading out into the streets to protest Ku Klux Klan violence, police brutality, and staging insurgent campaigns against conservative Democrats and Republicans alike. Now, African American leadership comes to recognize, to quote Jesse Jackson, that the people at the grassroots are on the move. And so they decide to use this grassroots energy to create a national progressive coalition that can actually contest for power. They stage a 1983 March on Washington to bring the coalition together. That march, which you can see behind you, was actually 50,000 people larger than the 1963 March on Washington. And then they decide to run an African American for president in the Democratic primaries with the idea that they can pull the Democratic Party, which had been listing rightward, back to the left. The person who lobbied very hard for that job and ended up getting it was, of course, Jesse Jackson. Now, from there, the coalition was off and running. staging some of the most influential campaigns of the decade. Perhaps the most storied was the Free South Africa movement. It featured the longest continuous civil disobedience campaign since the Montgomery bus boycott. In 1986, African Americans were positively instrumental in allowing Democrats to regain the Senate. And through doing that, they were able to slow Reagan's efforts to stack the federal judiciary with conservatives. And then in 1987, probably one of the more understudied aspects of all of this, activists in New York staged, quote, days of outrage to protest police killings and vigilante killings of African Americans in that city. These protests slowly fed into, about 2 years later, the first successful effort to have an African American attain the mayor's office in New York City. Now, through all of this activism, these African Americans had a controlling hand in defining not just black politics, but progressive politics. There were other left-of-center reform movements during the decade. There was a nuclear freeze movement, there was a gay rights movement, there was a Central American solidarity movement. But it was African Americans that tried to pull all these movements together into a national progressive coalition. And in so doing that, they created a center and a set of ideas and a set of symbols for progressive politics in the depths of the age of Reagan. The movement resurgence would decline in the 1990s, undermined by the persistence of the urban crisis and both political parties' shift towards the right, continuing shift towards the right. But as the energy that buoyed had buoyed the movement resurgence ebbed, African American leadership began to decouple protests from politics, and instead of having that rich fusion from the 1980s, they ended up reverting to just politics. And when they did that, they found themselves in the same place they were in the 1970s, wedged between one political party that was writing them off and another that was taking them for granted. As we struggle to continue the unfinished work of the civil rights movement, to create a society in which people have not just civil rights, but a decent standard of living across the board, we would do well to remember the critically important example of the movement resurgence. Thank you.
Back at history and an interesting education for many of us. So our final P for this session is a perspective on aging in life, and ask the question, when does our education end? The talk will be given by Yamashita Sensei. Dr. Taka Yamashita is a professor in the Sociology and Gerontology Department and co-director of the joint UMB-UMBC program, doctoral program in gerontology. He has a PhD in social gerontology from Miami University and a master's degree in applied gerontology and sport management from Ball State, and a master's in public health with epidemiology and biostatistics concentration from University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He joined the UMBC SAPH department in 2017, and in 2020 received Miami University's W. Fred Cottrell Distinguished Alumni Award, which recognizes outstanding leadership in the field of aging. He became one of the fellows of the Gerontological Society of America in 2023, which is an honor, and the highest internationally recognized status of their membership, and received an equally distinguished award from UMBC, the CAS Mid-Career Excellence Award. He has been the principal and co-principal investigator of research projects funded by the Department of Education, co-investigator of community-based research, funded also by the federal government. And his research interests include wider benefits of education, lifelong learning, health literacy, applied social science quantitative models, and global gerontology education. His research goal is to document how education and lifelong learning impact a wide range of outcomes such as employment, income, health status, subjective well-being, quality of life, happiness, and a bunch of other things, which are very important as an individual. So without further ado, Yamashita Sensei.
Good evening. It's great to be here. I have been a university professor for about 11 years, and it might come surprising to you, but I'm interested in education. Oh, you too? And about 20 years ago, I came to the United States for the first time to attend a graduate school. But somehow, I ended up in lowest level of English as second language program. And I was wondering why. And I went to my first class, and I realized that I didn't speak a word of English. I didn't understand anything. So from that moment, everything I do here in this country became an educational activity. And eventually, that became my research interest. I'm a gerontologist by training. The gerontology is the study of aging process. We use life course perspective. Life course perspective is a framework for us to better understand complex aging process using entire life history. We usually organize life course in 3 parts: education, work, leisure, or sometimes retirement. And I want to use education and learning somewhat interchangeably in this talk. There are 3 types of education. Formal education occurs at recognized educational institutions and usually result in degree or certificate. So if you come to UMBC, you get bachelor's degree in sociology, for example. That's a formal education. Non-formal education can happen anywhere. It's an organized educational activity, but it does not result in degree or certificate. So this GritX talk event is a good example of non-formal education. Just to be clear, you don't get bachelor's degree tonight just because you came here. Informal education is somewhat trickier because virtually anything, like reading a book, volunteering in a community, can be informal educational experience, depending on your life stage and social role. And I want to mostly focus on the formal education today. In the United States, about 44% of adult population has post-secondary degree. And when I was developing this slide, somehow I thought it would be a good idea to adjust the font size based on percentage. So professional degree has font size of 1. Doctoral degree has font size of 2. Now I'm realizing that that was not a good idea. But I just saw some of you still trying to read, so thank you for trying, and it just made my day. And when I ask people why they got their degree, the most common response is to get the job. But the benefits of education goes above and beyond getting a job. And I want to talk about the wider benefits of education based on 3 capital model. The human capital is a well-known concept in economics. It is a set of skills, knowledge, and credentials that would benefit your economic activities, such as getting a job, increasing your wage. The relationship between education and income is quite clear. If you have high school degree, you can expect median lifetime income of $1.5 million. But it becomes twice more if you have graduate degree, $3.1 million, even though there is some within group variability. Social capital is the resource that we can derive from our social network and social norms. Social capital promotes civic, cultural, political, and social participations. One form of civic participation, formal volunteering. People with higher educational attainment are more likely to volunteer through organizations, even though this does not capture informal volunteering. Shared values and the norms can create more cohesive community and society. Identity capital is about your self-concept. Identity capital can boost your self-confidence, self-efficacy, and motivation to learn. My own research, along with other researchers' work, clearly show that having post-secondary degree is closely linked with greater motivation to learn, which triggers subsequent educational activities. In a way, education can help us be ourselves, become ourselves, and find a place where we can belong. These three capital is sort of intermediate outcome. So what are the actual benefits of education over the life course? Education can boost your economic and social mobility. Education can improve your health and subjective well-being, such as happiness and life satisfaction. Education can promote your social participation, and therefore you'll be more heavily involved in community and society. And education promotes further education. Last several years, my collaborators, my graduate students, and I have been working on this topic. And the following is one of the key findings. Education actually promotes what I call life course fitness. Whenever we hear this term fitness, we always think about physical fitness, muscular strength, muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, flexibility, and body compositions. But what I mean by life course fitness here is that set of foundational skills. These include adult literacy skills, numeracy skills, digital problem-solving skills, and soft and 21st century skills, such as interpersonal, communication, and the leadership skills. These foundational skills are just like your muscle. If you don't use it, you're going to lose most of it over time. So this is exactly why it's so important for us to be continuously engaged in educational activities. And if we could do that, education can get us into this positive cycle of benefit-giving process over the life course. Earlier, I showed you this three-part life course model: education, work, and leisure. Gerontologists are now arguing that education, work, leisure should be integrated across the lifespan. So my take-home message for you today is our education should be a lifelong process. Our education should go life-wide. To answer the question of when does our education end, the answer is simply never. Our education should be always to be continued to maximize the wider benefits of education over the life course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yamashita. And to emphasize the importance of lifelong education, there'll shortly be a quiz on all the three talks that you heard, so that you can keep your neurons engaged. Can we have a final round of applause for all of our teachers? And with that, we go to our next break for approximately 5 minutes, Dr. Steiner tells me, and then we'll start with our final session.
And if you thought session number 1 was cool and session number 2 was blowing you out of this world, number 3 will top that one. And then we'll see how, oh yeah, really? For those of you who weren't here in the beginning, my name is Carl Steiner. I serve as the Vice President for Research and Creative Achievement here on the campus. Before we go into session 3, I want to give a major shout out to the audiovisual team, the events management teams. You don't believe how hard they work to pull all this together. And some of you who've ever had the opportunity to be on a stage or behind a stage, you know, it looks effortless up here, and there's a whole bunch of crazy things happening behind that. So that's just how it is. But really, my thanks to that entire team, because they're really doing a fabulous job. And this year, we have challenged the team a little bit more, as you will find out. You already saw the Cahoots thing, and that was a moment, right? And it worked beautifully. The thing is, the other faculty found out that, oh, you can do that. So now we're in trouble. Anyway, our third moderator for the third and final session, and before I go there, I said in the beginning, right after this, we invite you to come next door to the reception and showcase of some of the prior GridX presenters who are giving you an update on what's going on. I want to also do a quick shout out to Aaron Misendich is right there, the president of the BW Tech Park, who is actually the sponsor of that part of the event. So always happy to acknowledge that. And with all that, it's my pleasure to welcome our final moderator. It's Dean LaCourse, Bill LaCourse, who is the Dean of our College of Natural and Mathematical Sciences. Bill, take it.
I like this get clapping for just walking on stage. I figure that's going to happen even more as I get older. So, but not quite yet. So, I think we're going to continue with the theme there, Anupam, with P's. Even though there's no P's in the titles, but we've got people, right? Moms, man, and humans. So all those will get together here as we get together to see what's happening. But anyway, it's definitely a pleasure and honor here to introduce Dr. Patricia Ordonez, who is an associate professor in the Department of Information Systems at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, as of fall 2020. She also received her MS and PhD in computer science from UMBC, which is something great to see people come back home. So for 10 years, she was an assistant and associate professor in the computer science department at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, thereby fulfilling 2 lifelong dreams and unexpected midlife one. 1, living in a Spanish-speaking country. 2, having the opportunity to make a greater difference in the world. And 3, becoming a professor. Notably, she was the first Latina to graduate with a PhD from the College of Engineering and Information Technology at UMBC and the first female tenured associate professor in the computer science department at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. We should give her a hand for that. Her research interests are in applying machine learning, data mining, and visualization to multivariate time series analysis, specifically to large repositories of clinical and biological data as known as clinical informatics and biomedical data science. Among her many accomplishments, Dr. Ordonez is a former National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow and a recipient of a Great Minds in STEM 2021 HENAC Award in Education and the 2021 Access Computing Building Capacity Award. She is passionate about creating a more inclusive culture in computing and about bridging the digital and data divide in healthcare and education to reduce education, health, financial disparities locally and globally. With that aim, she is one of the principal investigators for the transformation of the Arecibo Observatory to the Arecibo C3 STEM Education Center in Puerto Rico. And I can tell you she's a good teacher because she gave me the best Spanish lesson I've ever had. So.
So, number 1 reason why moms should be leaders in computing education. We've been doing it wrong for so long. This is the percentage of women in majors that are predominantly male. If you notice in computer science education, we were doing it right till about 1984. We're talking about 1984 again, right? And then what happened? The personal computer came on the scene. And with the personal computer, basically there was a lot of marketing that was basically telling people to buy computers for the boys as if they were toys. The other number 2 reason is that actually women are already moms, actually. Beyond women, their moms are actually already leaders in computer science education. They were among the first that started taking national initiatives when they started realizing the disparities in marginalized communities and started seeing this as a form of segregation, of maintaining the segregation from the previous generations that we just heard from a speaker. I also heard another staggering statistic as why we need to do this. 91% of heads of households in public housing, and head of households with children in public housing are women. 91% in the United States. So turn that into numbers, and it ends up being around 232,000 households. Most of public housing is actually in the South. And then I started looking at children. How many do we have in these households? It's really hard to say. So I started looking it up, and I found that we have 11 million children in poverty. And since the pandemic, after the pandemic, it's actually gone up to 5.5 million. Basically, 5.5 are the ones that are in extreme or severe poverty. It took a hurricane for me to understand the systemic inequities that exist in education systems, even though I grew up and went to school in Baltimore. It was basically seeing that the help wasn't coming fast enough, and this happens. But you start to realize that this thing that oh my gosh, this always happens. I was really trying. I was not going to cry about this. You start to realize that you live in this little bubble, and the other people live in bubbles, and if you don't cross those bubbles, we're never going to make a difference in what we do. And the other thing I wanted to tell you about Puerto Rico is that after that, basically 500,000 of the families left, because that left a blackout that's been the longest in national history. And basically that blackout was over a year. And this is in a US territory, right? So basically children were left without education for an entire year. And then after that, what happened was, after that, what happened was the fact that, many different things. I'm trying to get back focused on this because sorry. Thank you. So after that, you started seeing things like waterborne diseases. What is this? In a U.S. people there are U.S. citizens. How do you see that? How do you see waterborne diseases, people dying of that? So I then started looking at what was happening, because there were all these instances. As a person who actually does technology, I was looking for Ushahidi, which is this open source platform. And what that platform does is actually emergency disaster management. And with that disaster management, what I started realizing is that people were assuming that people knew how to use a phone. It's my hair, sorry. And so this is called digital determinants, when you start making assumptions about a population and their use. And this happens with the elderly, this happens with, it happens with people with disabilities, and it happens with people in poverty. We just assume that they know how to use a cell phone and how they can make the most of it. So that's another reason why we have to have mothers, because basically what I saw and witnessed in Puerto Rico was a whole town that came together and ousted the governor. They demanded more for the ones that stayed. So that led us to the Arecibo C3 STEM Center. C3 stands for Ciencia, Computación y Comunidad. That's science, computing, and community. Because I wanted to basically make something out of those communities. They shouldn't be just to make themselves survive. They need to be something. We need to empower them. And that was part of the thing that we have here. What happened before the hurricane, I want to show you a picture of the telescope before the hurricane. And it didn't actually collapse immediately. Some cables collapsed. And it didn't actually collapse until 2020. But this is what it looked like on the other side. And this is what we're dealing with now. And so what we want to do is turn this into a top-notch learning center for the community. Actually make it accessible to the majority of the community. Part of this, the first step to solving this, is actually doing it here. And I was just so shocked because I said, okay, I'm not going to Baltimore. We're going to do it a little bit easier and go to Annapolis. And so we started trying to get into these public housing units because they're going through transformations to make the public housing. They're knocking it down and creating mixed income. And what happened with that, when we got there, is we found that in public housing here in Annapolis, the median income in that community is $12,000 annually. And around it, it's 1 square mile. And around it, it's 142,000. So we couldn't get there because obviously there are people protecting that community. And so you need to gain their trust. So we went to the community next door. And the community next door is where people who come out of that public housing are living. And it was great because we had collaboration from the resident manager and the resident services manager. And she basically connected us to a church. So we started in the basement of a church. And what we did there was something I'd never done before, which is human-centered computing. We started co-creating with that community what kind of a class would they need so that they would succeed. And so that we could get them to be leaders, and we wanted them to be teachers even. The idea originally was to be teachers because that's how I became a computer scientist. I started teaching computing. Within one semester, within a year, they had actually opened a new space. They didn't go through the full transformation. They were kind of in the middle of the transformation, and they created they made this center that they had into a computing center. And we got to teach the next semester there. And we've now actually started, we have a wonderful person working with us in Puerto Rico, and she got us into public housing in Puerto Rico. And now we have basically a cohort in Puerto Rico that we're going to start with and do the co-creation. If you notice one thing, these are not the mothers. And there's not many of them because the mothers are so busy trying to get their kids, taking care of the kids, taking care of their lives, and taking care of trying to get them out. And actually, they do a lot of helping the community. But you know the ones who watch out for the kids? They end up being the grandmothers. And so we actually noticed that even in Puerto Rico, the ones who came out for this are grandmothers. So we started looking at the statistics and saying, wow, how many grandmothers do we have? How many older people? And we found out that families with income are families with children are 35%, as well as the elderly. And then there's a whole 15% of people that are disabled without being elderly. And obviously a lot of the ones that we met that are the elderly in assisted housing were also disabled or had disabilities. And let's be real, we're all going to have disabilities when we get older. So actually doing this research is important for our future too. So what we started doing, we created a curriculum. We thought, okay, let's put 2 days of tech. We'll start with typing in the morning, but we'll break it up, and we'll let them create decide what they wanted. And what we found is that they were one of them was a former IBMer at one point. Another one was, couldn't remember how to use a phone and had trouble actually trying to schedule an appointment to get a driver's license. And another one actually was very, very good. But they were bored with that. They didn't want to do that. So we started doing creative technologies. And they loved that because they thought they weren't creative. They thought they couldn't do anything and create anything. So it actually started showing them that they can. And they were using the creative tech, and that's how they built their skills. The other thing we started doing, and this was an international student that came to do basically some work with me for credit. So she's coming over and she's building our entrepreneurship curriculum because that was her passion. And she got it so right. She's like, you've got to bring entrepreneurs that look like them. And so we started doing that, and we asked them, okay, what do you want to do? So we found entrepreneurs that were kind of in the same field, and we took them on field trips because one thing we've realized, they can't leave because they don't have licenses. And then we did the pilot, the actual pilot, the second semester. And there what we realized is we asked them, do you have computers at home that you could work from? But what happened is that all their computers had tons of viruses, and so they really couldn't access them. So we started doing cyber hygiene, and we brought a cybersecurity educator with us. And then what really amazing thing is that they started putting, well, look at what we can do with the makerspace, with the creative tech, and how can we make it on entrepreneurship? Because the idea that we want to do is that they make it sustainable, that we are there for a while, but then we leave and they can teach the classes. But then when we got to the teaching, we realized, oh yeah, that's right. Teaching it took us a while to learn teaching. It will take us a while to teach them too. So this is basically what we ended up. We started to see that our undergrads, in that second year, we brought undergrads with us to help because we realized that just having one teacher was not enough. You always had to have at least 2 people. So it was basically grads with undergrads, where the grads were doing their research in human-centered computing, and the undergrads were basically helping them out and helping with the digital skills. And what was really amazing and what we didn't expect is that every single undergraduate ended up going into the master's program. And then every single master's that worked with us applied for the PhD. Now that's a sample size of 5, right? But I think it shows a lot of promise for what could happen and how we can bring PhDs and the local community into our university if we start telling them we're going to be creating these community computing centers in your region. And so one of ours was actually a transfer. And he got us connections to Anne Arundel Community College. And so we took the ladies to Anne Arundel Community College, because at first we were thinking, oh, they have to come to UMBC to take classes, but if they can't drive, that's not possible. So what we did was take them over to ACC, and we presented them to, showed them around, and they were so excited about doing micro-credentialing there. And so we started thinking this cycle differently. Maybe the mothers will go to ACC, but maybe their children will end up coming to UMBC. And the other thing that they asked us for, we need psychologists. We need some psychologists. And we realized that this part of reaching out, we can't spend all that time building these connections. So we started realizing maybe what we need to do is talk to the social scientists at ACC. And one of our students, we took him to a meeting because we wanted to say, how can we create a pathway from Anne Arundel Community College over here through these community computing centers? He didn't realize that it took over an hour, even though it's only 8 miles away, for these women to get to the community college. He didn't realize that my student had taken over 2 of their associate's degrees, but had never had a research experience. So the importance of us building these opportunities for them to do research in any of these disciplines would be fantastic for them. So what does it help for us? What does it do for us as professors? We get to do transdisciplinary research. Transdisciplinary research basically tries to solve the complex problems in our society through multidisciplinary approaches. So basically, these B2G centers, their missions now are to reduce educational, health, and financial disparities by providing digital and tech education to these marginalized communities. And basically now what we're trying to do, instead of trying to making them teachers, we're trying to make them leaders. And what we want to do is actually make them a place for our students to make money, right? This is important to the mayor. Fran became one of our biggest, telling everybody, we started to be invited to these centers, and Fran was telling everybody about the importance of this for their community. One of our students that came to visit actually decided to start doing social entrepreneurship for mothers because she had a cosmetology license, and she thought, maybe if I teach them how to do this, and she actually won the startup competition on the entrepreneurship here. Because she said, I can make a social enterprise teaching these young mothers how to do their hair. And lastly, we got an invitation to the mayor's house as a thank you, and he gave us all a citation. I didn't realize a citation could be a good thing. So in closing, I just want to say that I believe that this is an opportunity for us to make a difference in our communities. It's an opportunity to give our students the opportunity to do cross-cultural communication, learn how to teach, and learn how to do research in HCC and computer science education. And it's something that if we do this right, we can uplift the community around us and bring them into our research programs. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mehdi Benna. He's a planetary scientist with a research focus in planetary exospheres and magnetospheres. Besides his scientific work, he supported and led development of several spaceborne instruments. Here they come. Rosetta Contour NINGEMS, MSL SAM, LA-D, NMS, Maven NGEMS. I'm making these up, you know. CLPS SEAL, GDAC Mosaic, Dissipation Sounding Rocket, and Artemis 3 LEMS. Wouldn't you like? We think at UMBC we make up a lot of acronyms, but I think that NASA's got us beat. So, Dr. Benner has authored or co-authored more than 150 scientific articles in peer-reviewed journals and more than 300 communications or invited presentations in international conferences related to the field of planetary science. His publications include articles on modeling of planetary magnetospheres, comets, and icy moons of the solar system, radio tomography techniques, and ill-posed inverse problems. Dr. Benner has been recognized by NASA through several individual and team achievement awards. Dr. Benner received a degree in electrical engineering and a Master's of Science degree in radio wave telecommunications from the Engineering School of Tunis. He received a PhD in space science from the University of Toulouse in France. And where was he when I was looking for that comet the other day? Every day my wife would bring me outside. It's near the horizon. It wasn't near the horizon. That's why they call it the devil comet. All right.
Is off, right? So it's not on right now, but when you go up to the stage, it will. Okay, thank you.
Eddie Benner, and this is a real-size model of the Lunar Environment Monitoring Station for the Artemis 3 mission. I would like to start by citing two quotations that defined lunar exploration of the 1970s. The first, very famous, was uttered by Neil Armstrong, the commander of the Apollo 11, when he first set foot on the lunar surface. This statement defined the subsequent 3 years of lunar exploration with the 6 Apollo landings. The second, less famous, was spoken by Gene Cernan, the commander of Apollo 17, while leaving the lunar surface to return to Earth. This less famous statement defined the subsequent 50 years of lunar exploration by declaring the end of human presence on the moon. So for the last 50 years of space exploration, and despite all human achievement in space, lunar exploration with astronauts was relegated to the feat of a single generation. Few small steps that humanity chose to not continue. Enter recently. In 2004, NASA announced the Artemis program, which set itself the goal of returning astronauts to the moon for scientific discovery, technology advancement, and to learn how to live and work on another world. The Artemis program will see that the Artemis 3 crew lands on the surface of the moon by late 2026. But unlike Apollo, this new program will progressively bring along all the elements needed to build permanent stations in lunar orbit and on the surface of the moon. So mankind is going back to the moon to stay, and to stay in a very special location, the South Pole of the moon. So the lunar South Pole is one of the most mysterious, least characterized environment of the solar system. It contains permanently shadow craters, areas that have not seen the light of sun for billions of years. Regions so cold, they still hold on ice deposits that date from the early formation of the Moon-Earth system. And so to explore this new frontier, NASA selected 3 instruments to be carried and deployed by the crew of the Artemis 3 mission on their historic maiden voyage. One of these instruments is the Lunar Environment Monitoring Station, or LEMS. And so LEMS is a compact instrument that will monitor the seismic activity at the South Pole for several years. The system is autonomous, it self-manages its power production, its data collection, and communication with Earth. To collect seismic data, it carries 2 optical interferometry seismometers with a wide seismic frequency band. LEMS is led by UMBC with collaboration from NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, the University of Maryland, College Park, the University of Arizona, the University of Washington at St. Louis, and Morehead State University. So you may ask, why a seismic instrument? Well, it happens that the moon is very chatty in the seismic spectrum. If you can only listen to the moon's ground noise, you will hear a lot of rumbling. You will hear the signatures of shallow quakes that are triggered by faults and scarps on the crust. Deep quakes that are caused by the tidal deformation of the entire moon. Thermal quakes that are generated as the surface transitions between days and nights. Impact quakes that are caused by the constant infall of micrometeoroid onto the moon. And so by listening to all the signatures of these moonquakes, we can reconstruct the composition and the structure of the lunar interior. We do it in the same way we can reconstruct the image of the human body with ultrasounds or X-rays. And so the LEMS you see here is a full-up standalone spacecraft. It has solar arrays to produce power when the sun is up. It has batteries inside to generate energy at night. It has a thermal system that keeps it from overheating during the day and keep it from freezing by the minus 200 degrees centigrades of the lunar nights. It also has a telecommunication systems that allows us to link to it once a month so we can retrieve the seismic data. On the side here, you can see a box where the 2 seismometers are stowed until LEMS is delivered to the moon. Once on the surface, the astronauts will extract these 2 seismometers and will bury them in the ground a few feet away. So, as we embark on this new journey of exploration, I would like you to remember that LEMS is the result of several years of research and development by 36 scientists, engineers, managers, and support staff. Years spent designing and testing every technical aspect that made LEMS possible. So, as I'm privileged today to address you, I'm only the representative of these outstanding individuals from UMBC and all the partner institutions who are making the Lunar Environment Monitoring Station possible. So to end, I would like to take the opportunity of this event to reveal the new visual identity of the LEMS mission, its mission patch, and its logo. Thank you for listening.
Don't pay attention to those people behind me. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Arya Ganjapati. He's a professor of information systems at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, with over 25 years of experience in academia. He earned his PhD in computer information systems from Rutgers University, and has since made significant contribution to the fields of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Dr. Ganjapati is the founding director of the Center for Real-Time Distributed Sense and Autonomy, otherwise known as CARDS, at UMBC, where he has led interdisciplinary research efforts. His research has been supported by over $27 million in extramural grants. All right, I had to take a look, so. Well, you don't know what's going on behind you. It's unnerving. His research spans various domains, including resource-constrained AI, cybersecurity, and healthcare, with a strong focus on developing AI-based autonomy technology. He has published over 125 scholarly articles and mentored 23 PhD students, many of whom have gone to successful careers in academia and industry. Dr. Gajapati's work has had a profound impact on both fundamental research and practical applications, particularly in areas of national importance such as autonomous systems, cybersecurity, and healthcare diagnostics. All right, welcome to the stage, Dr. Arya Gajapati.
Good evening. So tonight we're going to talk about human-machine teaming, in particular how humans and robots can work together to accomplish certain tasks that are either very hazardous or sometimes impossible for humans to do by themselves. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to have some demonstrations on the floor, on the stage. We normally do this in outdoor space, so we'll see how it goes on here. So here are some scenarios where, and just a few scenarios where it is extremely dangerous for humans to go in. So for example, train wrecks, inside a tunnel, fire, smoke, all kinds of hazardous conditions. Large blocks of ice, falling off of glaciers. You can send drones, but you don't want to send humans in there. Tall buildings collapsing, another example of where it can be extremely dangerous. And sometimes firefighters and rescue workers risk their lives to save others, but it can also be very dangerous for them. And then airline and aircraft fire. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this is going to be done. So these robots can be completely autonomous, or they can be human navigated. We're going to show you how you can navigate these robots using gesture-based controls. And they don't have to be in proximity of each other. As long as they're connected via the same network, they can be on different parts of the universe or the world. So there are essentially two groups of equipment that are mounted on these robots. You need sensors to really sense the environment. And here we have radars, LiDARs, thermal cameras, and real sense cameras, which are really standard red, green, and blue cameras. And then we have a bunch of very slow capacity, low power, low lightweight, very small form factor devices where all the computing is actually going on board the robots themselves. For example, Jetson Nanos, Raspberry Pis, and Intel NUC. So this is the AI on the edge, and we are pushing it to the extreme edge where we can even more miniaturize some of these devices. So we're going to demonstrate how these robots can actually go and figure out what's going on in the environment, where the human operators can sit at a safe distance and remotely get an input and converse with the robots. So we're going to show you how the robots can work and also give an update on exactly what they're observing and have a conversation with the robots. Now it's going to be completely off the script, so the robots can go crazy and start blabbering or saying things that are completely irrelevant, but we'll see how it goes. Okay? So with that, we're going to get started. So a couple of my students are going to take over and get the robots on the stage. And
Unpause.
Hi, good evening everyone. So these are our fleet of quadruped robots. I guess you would have seen this earlier, but these are very unique, and we have built a lot of technologies in-house under the supervision of Dr. Arya, and we have been doing research and development on a day-to-day basis. So I guess there is less enthusiasm in the group, so why don't I let my associate to welcome the robots. Harsh?
Squad, say hello.
Okay, so these tiny headsets onto our head is the augmented reality and virtual reality headsets. So these robots are usually controlled through tablets, but what we have done is we have developed an interface with which we can control these robots using our hand gestures with these augmented reality headsets. And there have been a lot of research and development activities which have been going on in our CARDS center, but with a very few time limited to this particular podium, we'll demonstrate a very few technologies that can be used in a the search and rescue operations or a disaster management situations. So you could see there are two screens which are projected here. One is the orangish screen, that is a feed of a thermal camera which is situated on top of this robot, and the other one is a regular camera which is situated on top of the red robot there. So let's see if we send one of these robots to a disaster management or a search and rescue operations, how does it behave? So we necessarily cannot create a disaster here, though we have created a lot in outside environments. So we have created smoke screens and smoke and dusty environments, but let's project a screen which will have a railway disaster inside a tunnel, and then we'll send a robot there to see how it behaves. We can actually have a question here, like these cameras are already on top of the robots. Why do we have to actually send a robot and then talk to it? Let's say there are n number of these robots, for example 10 to 20. So you can, an operator in charge cannot be looking at all the screen at once, so but he can talk to them. So let's say I'll ask my associate to take the red robot towards the screen to see how it responds to a disaster. So this one here is a train accident inside a tunnel where the difficulty is increased to the maximum, and we'll take the red robot to this place to see how it interacts with the command.
Switch to red.
And the lights on these robots are just as a navigation cue. Let's say if it is yellow, the robot is in navigation mode. Let's say if it is in red, then it has seen something disastrous, or it is trying to communicate with the command in person. So over to Dr. Gangopadhyay.
Describe the scene.
Train wreck in tunnel.
Do you see any humans?
No, I do not see any humans.
Is it safe to go inside?
Not safe. Train wreckage, debris everywhere.
Should we send a rescue team?
Yes, we should send a rescue.
Awesome, thank you, Professor. So this is basically, the robot is actually seeing this environment and we can literally interact with it. Okay, enough of the projection. Let's see one live. So I would ask one of my research associates to just walk into that bunker, which is actually a hunting blind. So we'll consider that as a bunker here. Now we'll see difference in the streams. Let's say this camera has that robot has a standard camera, and it will not be able to see the person, but now since there is light, it is able to actually. So can we make that area a little dark, please?
Do you see anybody inside the bunker?
Yes, there is a person inside the bunker.
Could you please repeat the question?
Okay. Do you see anybody inside the bunker?
The image is dark and blurry.
Awesome. So let's switch screen.
No, there is no one inside the bunker.
Switch streams.
Switching stream now.
Harsh? Okay, I'll take the black one to.
So switching streams essentially means that it's going to change the modality from a regular
Switch to
camera
black.
to a thermal camera.
So that is a standard camera which was not able to actually see that there is a person inside the blind. Let's say we take the robot with a thermal camera which is actually able to recognize that there is a person inside.
Do you see anybody inside the bunker?
Yes, I see a person inside the bunker.
What is he doing?
Person standing near a camera.
That was off script. I did not know what he was going to say.
So that is quite a normal response from VQA, which is installed on top of the robot. And everything is happening on top of the robot. There is no cloud server here. There is no edge. So these are all edge devices. So along with this, we have also developed other capabilities which will be used for disaster navigation scenarios. For example, let's say there is a debris and then it has to crouch inside an environment. Harsh, can you?
Black crouch.
So it can go to the lowest of its height. Let's say there is a object which it has to actually tiptoe and then see.
Black
so it can also do that. So this is the maximum height which the robot can actually go. And there are a lot of other developments which we are unable to demonstrate due to time constraint. But yeah, this marks the end of our demo right here under the supervision of Dr. Arya. There are other developments which is going on here. And thank you all.
So I would like to get all the developers to please come to the stage.
Squad, say thank you.
Thank you.
Like highlight.
Anyway, let's give it up for all our speakers in the last third. I think there's something in acting where they tell you don't do movies with children, animals, and now that's going to include robots too, especially robot dogs. Anyway, last thing is everybody's been thanked, but I want to make sure that we thank Carl. Another excellent year. Thank you.
I told you we're going to go around the world. We're going to go into tunnels. We're going to leave the world. If we can get the next slide, Matt. And go to the next one. And hang there for a second. I have one more little tidbit in there. Many of you know that 2-3 years ago, UMBC was recognized as an R1 institution, the so-called Carnegie Research 1 institution that puts us in the top 146 institutions in the country, and one of only 3 in Maryland. And you might think that happened, yeah, right? Because we do stuff like this, by the way, right? And so some of you may think, well, that happened overnight. How did that happen? You know, there's a lot of work on it, but we have surreptitiously planted the idea for 7-8 years, because if we go to the next slide, it's always been there. I'm just saying, you guys just didn't know it, okay? On that note, one more thanks for all of our presenters. It was unbelievable. Thank you for joining us. It's really my honor now to ask one final speaker to come out. There you are, somebody that doesn't need an introduction, our president, Valerie Scheers-Ashby.
Was that not amazing? So I had the feeling sitting there that I want to take every class that each one of those people, I almost felt like I could do physics, Todd. And I also thought I had some artistic ability when I was looking at the typography. It was simply beautiful. Thank you all for coming out. It was just an amazing display of everything that UMBC is. Didn't you feel good about being a retriever? Yes, I did too. I did too. The beauty of what we just saw is that was all us. These weren't, people we invited for a national, international, a conversation. These were all our own people. This is the experience that our students have every single day, and I'm looking in the audience at several more faculty and staff who I know are delivering a beautiful education for our students every single day. So that was just extraordinarily exciting. I just have to say a couple of things about what I heard. Stephanie, she said that they were making the impossible real. I live in the city of Baltimore. That is a big statement. That's a bold statement. And then they backed it up with the actual work to actually move the needle. That was just incredible work. She said the words that we're going to eradicate violence in in Baltimore. If a UMBC, right? And who else would we expect to say that except for a retriever? Absolutely. And then to do the work to do it. And then Todd, as I said, I almost thought for a second that I could do quantum physics. That was just beautiful, but I loved your statement. The first one I heard was the laws of quantum physics are wonderful. I thought, wow. That was beautiful. I agreed with Bohr and Schrodinger and Einstein just about how amazing quantum physics is. And as I've said, I almost thought I had some artistic ability and could create my own font. That was just beautiful. But then we switched over to round 2. And by the way, did you note that our deans were introducing people who were not in their college? Was that not cool? I was so impressed by you all. That was amazing. I so appreciated that. It speaks to the interdisciplinary, and as we just heard, transdisciplinary work that we're trying to do here at UMBC. In that second round, when we talked about beauty, I sat there thinking, no wonder I love my job. I just get to see beauty all day. And your definition was so wonderful because it said it doesn't matter what the person or the thing giving you, they don't even know. It's not reciprocal. It's just I get to look at it and call it beautiful because it affects me. And so I thought that was just amazing. Derek, when I listened to you, first of all, welcome back. Glad to have you back. But I listened to those latter 3 or 4 talks talking about systemic community issues. Long-ranging systemic community issues. And here's what I heard you say. First of all, I heard you say we have a lot of work to do. And everybody in this room has a part to play in it. But I heard you say that there are some solutions, but they're created with the community. We don't bring a solution to a community. We go in a community and try to co-create solutions with some humility. And that was beautiful to see. I also heard you, Derek, say that representation matters. People need to see people who look like them and have had their similar experience. And then I heard Derek say, we need to do and. So some people in this audience are protesters and others of you are going to do politics, but I heard it's both. And with the world in which we live, surely it has to be everything that we can imagine. And so we're going to go with politics and protests. And then I saw this beautiful heart and care. Did you see it? Throughout, right? But that beautiful heart and care in all of the work that makes our students get excited and believe that they can be the people who say bold things like we're going to eradicate violence in Baltimore. That was just such sincere care and love for a community. And so finally, I hope you appreciated the last 2 talks. Sometimes at UMBC, I'm just amazed by how humble we are to be so fabulous. But it's a beautiful thing. Part of my job is to actually tell the story so that we're not so invisibly fabulous. Like, I want it to be more visible and fabulous. The last 2 talks, I don't know if you caught it, but the student said that it was the faculty member, it was Aria, who said, we're pushing AI to the extreme edge. And then you watched it. That was extraordinary. And you saw the team of students that had the opportunity to push AI to the extreme edge. And then finally, I just want to highlight this. I keep saying it everywhere I go. UMBC is going to the moon. Yeah. So I need you to tell all of your friends. Here's the story I need you to tell all of your friends. People have not been to the moon in more than 50 years. We are now going back. Do you realize that that device that he showed you is actually going to sit on the moon? I mean, that wasn't a replica, right? Like, that thing that was sitting on this carpet is going to be sitting on the moon's surface. Here's the part that's impressive that I like to say because I'm a little competitive. I appreciated your comments. They went to College Park, whatever. Just teasing. I love College Park, but I like us to lead. The thing I want you to know about that Artemis 3 mission is that there was a competition to be able to create these scientific instruments. And there were 3 experiments chosen. 3, 1, 2, 3. One was from a university in Japan, is that right? In Tokyo. Another was from an industry, a company in Colorado. And UMBC is the only university in the country to be a part of that experiment. So please tell all of your friends. We're recruiting amazing students, amazing faculty, amazing staff, and I'm just so proud. Carl, thank you for what your team has done. Thank you to the events team, as you have already said. And I'm just happy to welcome you to Homecoming 2024. Yeah. Only at UMBC do you start homecoming with physics, okay? Only. This is a special place. Somebody told me that we were just having all kinds of nerdy joy this weekend, and I said, that's a beautiful thing. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for all of you for everything you did. And to our speakers, that was extraordinary. Thank you.